Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to CPA Today on LYK Radio 2 with me, Chris Kendrick. On today's agenda, we will briefly discuss the topic of new public management and the way it affects the Canadian public. Joining us today is Ryan Lau, Professor of Whiskey Studies, author of The Man with the Iron Flask, and student of Canadian Public Administration. Hello and welcome.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be on your show.
So, I've heard that you've been keeping yourself fairly busy studying public administration in Canada, with particular emphasis on new public management. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of this style of administration in Canada?
I'd love to. Well, new public management is famously known for its emphasis on the three E's: efficiency, effectiveness, and economy. It first gained widespread notice in the late 1970s when then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher adopted the approach to governance to combat the fiscal hardships caused by an economic recession in the Western world. This particular focus on the efficient yet effective delivery of public services also caught the attention of Canada's progressive conservative government in the early 1980s. Led by former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the federal government began lowering state expenditures through adopting many different aspects of the new public management system, while simultaneously addressing the unresponsive nature of the existing government style to public service users.
Addressing the unresponsive nature of the existing government. By that, do you mean changing the strict bureaucratic structure that inhibits reaction to the change in public needs and suggestions?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the ways this is done is by implementing the new public management policy of privatization of certain government-owned companies. The rationale behind such a proposal is both political and economical. Politically, because crown corporations were partly created to implement policy goals set out by the federal government, it can be considered as a policy instrument. And as such, the governing party's political perspective can be expressed through the manipulation of these companies. In short, the sale of crown corporations can signal the incumbent government's ideology, the disapproval of the previous administration's decisions, or a change in service provision strategies. Now, oftentimes, during the debates to sell off crown corporations, many in the opposition cling on to the argument that there is the possibility of a decrease or a gap in the services the public is used to. However, as Professor of Business Law Edward Iacobucci and Professor of Law and Economics Michael Treblecock have noted, members of the opposition do overlook the fact that there are alternative methods of service delivery. The resulting substitutes are normally fully capable of providing the same services as the previous institutions.
Could you elaborate on these substitutes?
Well, just in general, the private sector will include companies that provide the same services who will fight for customers. By eliminating the artificial monopoly created by the crown corporations, the public will be the ones catered to, thus receiving the most benefit.
And so individuals will be able to vote with their wallets.
That is correct.
So it links very closely to economics.
Definitely. After all, efficiency and economy make up two of the three E's.
Please explain to us a little bit of that.
Sure. On the economic side, for new public management subscribers, the privatization of crown corporations first and foremost has to make fiscal sense. Iacobucci and Treblecock have found in their joint research that increasingly, the economical and technological environments that prompted the creation of many of Canada's crown corporations no longer exist. The researchers argue that simply these institutions, though iconic and treasured by many Canadians, have become largely obsolete. Influential scholars and long-standing proponents of new public management, David Osborne and Ted Gabler, have suggested that governments must steer, not roll, in support of the notion that while governments should create and enforce guides and regulations on the provision of certain services, they should not concern themselves with managing the business operations of those services. Ultimately, the unsheltered competitive business environment crown corporations will be released into should encourage cost-efficient service delivery while promoting the ever-present necessity for high client satisfaction.
You quoted Osborne and Gabler. Governments must steer, not roll. That's very interesting. But not every instant of privatization yielded positive results. Is that correct?
Of course, no public policy action can be 100% guaranteed, since nothing occurs in isolation. And while there are cases around the world where privatization actually results in higher costs and reduced effectiveness of service, the key message to be taken away is this: not every sector requires the same degree of privatization. Indeed, some services are better left to the government administration. However, where it does occur, privatization does not negate proper governmental oversight, as is provided for any other industry.
Thank you, Ryan, but we're just about out of time. I appreciate you joining me for a chat on new public management and privatization today.
It's been a pleasure, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Lau. And thank you all out there for listening in to this program. This has been CPA Today on LYK Radio 2.